Ladies and gentlemen,
South Carolina is to at least make Omaha. We even want to win it, but if you can't make Omaha, we all knew this was eventually going to happen.
We've got an infielder that's been playing primarily third base named KJ Scobie. And Scobie's going to be a dude. I mean, he's going
Behind
to
the
be a real.
plate and cannot step on the plate or in front of the plate before he receives the baseball.
Passion for the game, and that's you guys could both play for me in that respect.
Well, knocking off Pat McAfee, you might knock him out of off of ESPN.
Welcome back to the SEC Baseball Nerds podcast. My name is Patrick Brown. I'm here with Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. Jack, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on, Patrick. Happy to finally talk some baseball as opening day is, as of tomorrow, 2 weeks away.
I know it's crazy. I'm very excited for this Gamecock team this year, obviously under new leadership, a lot of new transfers, a lot of new freshmen. Let's start with expectations, because I know our expectations are all over the place. What are your realistic expectations early in the season for this team?
Yeah, realistic and unrealistic are, you ask a lot of people and it's like, oh, get back to Omaha this year, right? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily realistic. I think what is realistic, and I haven't thought about it too much with what my ultimate predictions will be this year, but I'm thinking have a good year, probably need to be about a 2 seed maybe, in potentially hosting a regional would be nice as well, but I think on the more realistic side of things in year one of Pulmonary, especially with how stacked the SEC is going to be this season, like it always is, I think a good 2 seed would be nice. You get a good regional, opportunity somewhere. Hopefully, maybe in the Carolinas somewhere with how stacked the Carolinas are in baseball. It seems to be, and then maybe make a run to Omaha from there. But I think it's going to be tough to be one of those top 16 teams in the country that gets to host a regional and then maybe even a super regional. So I think for South Carolina, they're probably going to have to go on the road for postseason play this year, which isn't a bad thing, but I think that would be about right. And then maybe get to a super. I think that would be pretty nice.
So I was reading your article the other day about Ethan Petrie and where he's going to slide in, and most people are talking about first base right now, and I've just been very interested. Where do you think he's going to go? And then especially I've heard people talking about moving Kennedy Jones at DH, and then where does that stand in left field?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So number one, yeah, I think Ethan's going to end up playing first base this year. Now I know everyone in the past has been used to him playing so much out in right field, which obviously is true. And hearing Paul Mainieri talk about Ethan going back all the way to the fall, he sees his future as a first baseman when he's talking about him playing at the next level in professional baseball, which makes a lot of sense. And Ethan played, I think, 21 games at first base last year, because you'll remember Gavin Cassis went down with an injury near the end of the year. And even before that, Ethan was playing a lot more first base when Gavin was over at third. So I think Ethan's home is at first base this season, which puts KJ Scobie, freshman coming in this year, playing third base. Paul Mainieri's basically confirmed that KJ is the starter at third base, as he just got back on, I want to say it was earlier this week with from that twisted ankle he had. Now, as for what South Carolina does in left field with Kennedy Jones, in my opinion, it wouldn't shock me if Kennedy's out there playing the outfield this year, but I just think you have better options in the outfield, and you do need someone to DH for this team. It's not going to be Petrie, obviously. So I think putting Kennedy at the DH position makes a lot of sense, because he's a much better bat than he is a glove out there in the outfield. Me personally, I think your outfield is going to kind of just shape up like this. I think you have Nathan Hall in center field. I think that just makes the most sense in the world to put him out there. He's a great outfielder. He's also a good bat, which I think is where he legs up Evan Stone out there. Then I think out in left field, you have Blake Jackson, who obviously returns from last year's team. He's a good contact bat, gets on base. He's a little bit quick too on the feet. And I think he's somewhere probably in like the 6 to 7 hole in the order. I think he was higher up in the order last season, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely somewhere in the middle of the order feels best for him. And then right field's a little bit of, I don't want to say a question mark. It's just give a lot of options out there that I don't know exactly what they're going to do. They were playing Evan Stone out with I guess what you would call the A team starting lineup of your starting 9, which in scrimmages is, one team with pretty much what could be the opening day 9, and then your B team essentially is your backups that we think won't start on opening day. But Stone's been out there with that group, and I haven't been able to get out to all the scrimmages, with basketball going on and stuff. So I do think we'll see. I'll be out there for a few this weekend to get a better idea. But as of right now, I'm not sure which way they're going to go with right field. If it does come down to it, I think maybe Evan Stone does get that nod just because he has been playing out there with the potential opening day team.
Another roster idea is second base with Nolan Nedorowski and obviously Will Tippett with Henry Kazakmar, the transfer from Ohio State, being at shortstop. Where do you kind of see that playing two experienced guys? Of course, Nedorowski started almost every game at Clemson last year and was a big piece for them, and Tippett starting most games at shortstop here last year.
Yeah, so Tippett obviously has the experience of playing shortstop at South Carolina last year, but Henry Kazmar is going to be the starting shortstop for South Carolina this season. That's another position that Maneri basically confirmed that Henry's going to be starting over at short. And with Henry, I love his bat. I love his bat to ball skills. The contact that he has at the plate is just it's something that you can't always just teach. And he's a decent defender, if you will, not his strength necessarily. He made 12 errors at Ohio State last year, but I think you can live with the defense not being amazing when you have his ability to get on base, his ability to drive and runs and steal and provide a nice thump at the top of the order, probably in the number 2 hole. Now, as for second base, Nolan Naraki's been banged up since the fall when he banged his knee into a wall, I guess at Founders Park, during one of the fall scrimmages. And so I haven't seen him in scrimmage action yet. I don't know if that's going to change this weekend with the second weekend of scrimmages. But for right now, it seems like Will Tippett's going to be your starter at second base this season, which makes a lot of sense. Will had a great fall. I think he is definitely going to come along this season. And, the knock against him has always been that he doesn't hit for average at all or anything. Or, he's kind of just, you plug him in the 9 hole and you kind of just leave him there and let him, hit a home run every now and then. I think he's definitely going to come along nicely this year, his third year. And, he's only hitting from the right side now, too. So, until Naraki gets back, I think Tippett's your second baseman, and then we'll see what happens with Nolan. You mentioned he played a lot at Clemson last year. I'm not sure if he ends up just being the starter when he comes back or whatever. Obviously, it's going to take some time to get him fully ramped up, but we'll see how much, I think he was going to be the starter before he got hurt, so maybe that'll be the case again.
I want to talk about KJ Scobie. We were talking to Money Lee about him. Everybody's big on KJ. And what do you see out of KJ? What do you think makes him the next big Carolina player and a way he can step up for this team this season?
Yeah, so Maneri mentioned last week for the opening press conference of the preseason that he mentioned that when he was at, I think maybe he was at LSU somewhere recently in his coaching stops, that the one thing he may not have had at one point was a third baseman. You need to have a third baseman, a good one at that, to have a good team. And if you don't have a third baseman, look at South Carolina last year when Talmadge Lucroy was your starting third baseman, and we know how things kind of went in Hoover for him, and even in the NCAA tournament in the regional round where he was just a real liability over at third base. Let's call a spade a spade. Like, he just was not reliable over there. He was making errors. He was making plays that, you need to be able to make your third baseman. He just wasn't making them. And so with KJ, Maneri's really high on his defense, number one. But for me, I think the real thing that stands out, and it's kind of similar to Henry Kazmar, from what I saw in the fall, this dude's contact skills, the bat to ball is just, he's going to put the ball in play this season. He's going to get on base. He is going to be a consistent guy that I think ends up hitting about 300 this year or better. He's that type of dude that can be really special for South Carolina. And will it happen right away? He's a freshman. It's going to take a little bit of time for him to get going. Not everyone will be Ethan Petrie right out of the gate, setting the world on fire. But I think for KJ, he's going to be starting this season at third base. I think he's going to be a really nice piece. And even Maneri said himself, he's going to be a special player in the SEC.
Before we get into the pitching staff, I want to talk about Maneri's leadership and what he brings his team that this team might not have had in the past. What do you feel like is going to change with Maneri's leadership this year? Whether it's just cutting down on the errors, throwing more strikes, what do you think it will be?
I think it's got to be defense, number one. Defense has to be better if you're South Carolina this year. I mentioned Talmadge before. It's not just him, by the way. It's other guys in this team that have made errors and bad defensive plays in the past. I think just the fundamentals will be so much better this season. And Is South Carolina going to make errors from time to time? Yes. Every great team makes errors. It's not this uncommon thing that you go perfect throughout a season without making a single error. I mean, if you're South Carolina though, you want to cut down on games where you maybe had 2 errors and bring it down to 1 or even 0. But I think defense is going to be much better this season, and that's something like if you want to play for South Carolina, you got to have defense. That's basically straight from the mouth of what Maneri had to say. And I think beyond that, I think you see the I don't want to say like he's this all no nonsense kind of guy, but he's a guy that I think there's more accountability with this coaching staff at South Carolina. Not to say that there wasn't under the previous coaching staff at all, but you can just tell that the guys are more I don't know what the right way to put it is, but just they're whole, everyone's being held more accountable. Essentially, it seems like. At the same time, though, this is a group that seems to be pretty loose, having fun, which isn't a bad thing. But at the same time, when it comes down to business, they're trying to get stuff done.
Onto the pitching staff side of things. The big question with this staff is we all know the offense is going to be there, but can the pitching keep up? Most places we've seen Jersenbeck, SQ, and possibly McCoy as your starters. Are you feeling along those same lines?
I think so. I have not gotten to see Dylan pitch yet. I've seen the other 2 guys pitch that you've mentioned in scrimmages, and again, that was just due to basketball going on last week when Dylan SQ threw last Saturday, I believe it was. Hopefully, I'll get to see him throw this weekend. But either way, I talked to Dylan when we had our the media day at Founders, and the one key thing for him is that he was a 3-pitch guy last year, but he's now a 5-pitch guy going into 2025, and he's added the cutter to his repertoire of pitches, which is such a big deal for him because it's a pitch that he feels like he can get batters out with. And it'll be a story I have later on GamecockCentral.com, but it's something that him and Terry Rooney worked on, and Maneri seems to love what he's seeing from SQ. Obviously, we saw the potential last year where SQ can be that guy that is a reliable pitcher for the Gamecocks. I mean, he did it against Kentucky with 6 shutout innings in that really memorable run rule game at Founders Park last year. But then there were other times where SQ went to the lineup one time, and then it was kind of gloom and doom from there, where he just couldn't get guys out. He fell behind in counts, had a lot of walks, that sort of thing. So if he minimizes that, if the pitch mix ends up being really beneficial for him, where he's able to go with a different pitch to get guys out instead of a 3-pitch mix, a 5-pitch mix, then I feel like he's going to be a weekend starter for this team. I feel confident in saying Eli Jersenbeck's going to be your Friday night guy. It just feels like it's been that case since Maneri was hired. Like, it's just the way Maneri's talked about him going all the way back to the summer as a guy that he just did not want to lose to the MLB draft, which of course he didn't. I think is just he's so high on Jersenbeck and what he can do. And the only concern I really have with that is that you got to keep in mind he has not pitched in a game at South Carolina, a regular season game, since 2023. So how will that kind of look? It's just like you're putting a lot on a guy's shoulders coming off Tommy John surgery. Yes, I know he's had a full fall. Yes, I know he's having the preseason to ramp up. But it's different when you're going through the season. You got SEC play around the corner and all that in March. I mean, where is he going to be at? I wasn't his first scrimmage start that I saw. Maybe he'll perform better on Friday. He walked a lot of guys in the first inning. His command didn't really seem to be in the zone, and that's going to happen with guys going through their first outings and stuff of the preseason. But you'd like to see him have a little bit more command out there, which I believe he definitely will. He's got the stuff to be the Friday night guy. He's got some of the best stuff on the team, but we'll see how he ends up performing once the season gets going. And then Jake McCoy, I mean, he throws about the hardest on the team. He's clocking about 97 miles an hour. He's a left-hander. I think he probably is your Saturday guy, in my opinion. He's taken some really big steps forward this year. The one key difference this year, now that he's a sophomore, you got to keep in mind, he didn't pitch it all in the fall last year because he was injured. Then he didn't make his college debut until the Ole Miss series, which was the first weekend of conference play last season. And then he was kind of just that reliever guy that kind of came in at random midweek, when the score's out of hand, that sort of thing. So I think with a full fall and full preseason under his belt, he's going to really benefit from it. And then he's added a new pitch with the changeup to his repertoire as a 3-pitch guy now. And I think with the velocity he throws with, if he minimizes the walks, gets the control, that's the thing with all these guys. If they get their control under their belts and they just pound the zone and they're not walking a ton of guys, they'll be just fine this year. But I think that's unless Matthew Becker or someone like that contends for a starting role, then I think this is your starting role or starting rotation of Jerzenbeck on Friday, McCoy on Saturday, SQ on Sunday. But that's just how I feel.
And I think these guys have potential, very much potential. But the problem, especially with SQ last year, he would get in these 3-2 counts. He would walk guys, bases would get loaded. He would give up a homer. He's going next inning. And especially with McCoy last year, you didn't see much out of him, but he just didn't look his sharpest. And then obviously with Jerzenbeck, he was hurt last year. So it's a bunch of questions for this guy this year. You don't necessarily have that guy coming back that put up superstar numbers last year. And so it's just going to be a transition in for these guys. But I think there's tons of potential there. And Mainieri seems very high on these guys. And I think if the pitching staff can do their job, this team can be great.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, man. And that's the thing with this pitching staff that we need to keep in mind. There might not be the big names of the past. Like you may not know what the rotation looks like right out of the gate with you're in the past. You had, like, I'm thinking back to 2023, that team that made it to the Super Regional in Gainesville. You knew Will Sanders, Noah Hall, Jack Mahoney. That was going to be your rotation. You knew that right from the jump. With this rotation, we think we know what it's going to end up being. Honestly, I wasn't sure if Dylan was going to be a weekend guy or McCoy. I figured Jers was going to be the one guy for sure. I thought maybe it'd be some other guys, but once Mainieri basically said those are the front runners, I can kind of see it now to where these guys are going to be real big pieces this season. So again, I think what will end up happening with this group is, by the beginning of the season, there might be a lot of question marks, but they're going to get answered as the year goes on. And I think the potential of these guys, if they live up to what many expect them to do, then this could be a really solid pitching staff that kind of flies under the radar.
I want to talk the bullpen a little bit too. Obviously, Matthew Becker, a star piece coming back. I see him being kind of the swing guy, maybe like a James Hicks from previous years. This guy that can give you some innings worth, and then obviously Parker Marlat's coming back. I think Ashton Crowther from Miami, Jarvis Evans from Georgia, Eddie Copper can give you some time. What are you seeing out of the top bullpen guys coming back, as well as Tyler Pitzer and possibly a closer role?
Yeah, the Pitzer closer role is an interesting thought because, I think that honestly wouldn't be the worst idea. Me personally, I would have Pitzer as kind of like almost like Becker last year, actually, a little bit, where you can have him close games if you need to, but you can also throw him in there for like a midweek game if you need to. I think that would be ideal for Pitzer because I would like to see him start some games this year. But if you're not going to be able to use him in the role that you really want to, then I think back end of the bullpen is where it makes most sense for him because he did show some really good stuff last year when he had to. I mean, I think of the Vanderbilt start where he went, I think it was like 7 1/3 innings of 3-run ball. He was really solid for South Carolina last season in the time that he was out in the mound. How I think this bullpen will shake out, I think you probably do have Pitzer maybe in the back end of the bullpen, or he's a midweek guy. I think we'll see how Eddie Copper is because Eddie was a great midweek pitcher for this team last year before he got hurt. You have Matthew Becker. You mentioned him being the swing man. He's a guy that has closed before. He's relieved. He's started games. I think he's a guy that can do it all. I'd like to see him in one specific role this year, and that be that, and not have him bounce all over the place because that was one of the issues I had with how he was used under the previous staff was that it was just nothing consistent. And I feel like maybe that led to some occasional struggles at times. But I think Matthew had the best stuff in the fall on the team. I thought he was going to be a shoo-in for the rotation. We'll see if that ends up being the case. I don't know if it is. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that way. But I think he's your back end of the bullpen guy that can close. But here's the thing with being a closer for him. He can go multiple innings. So if you need a 9-out save or something, you could potentially go with that. And then as for the rest of the bullpen, I think it's kind of I don't know honestly how the rest of it's going to shake out. I think you have a lot of starters in there that aren't going to make the rotation that could be long relief guys. They could be like 2 innings or whatever. You're going to have to figure that out, how you want to use those guys and who maybe starts on midweeks. And then as your weekend bullpen goes, I think Pitzer makes sense. I think Marlott is a great piece to have back there. Really underrated guy. I think he could be your 7th, 8th inning guy. And then obviously Becker, but we'll see if it's Becker, Pitzer, whoever's closing games. You need someone reliable back there to be the bridge to getting the game done.
All right, I got one more segment before you go. Daniel was really high on the segment. This segment is called Hot Takes.
Yeah.
You need to give us your best hot take this year for South Carolina baseball.
Oh, that's a great question. I'd like to say they just make it to Omaha. That'd be awesome. I'd love to go out to Omaha this year. I'm sure it's nice around this time of year. I don't know, man. Honestly, I'm not sure how this is going to go. I think Jake McCoy leads the team in strikeouts. I'm going to be honest. I think he's got the best velocity on the team, like I said, and I just think that's something that South Carolina's been missing for such a long time now. Is you've had good pitchers, but honestly, guys that throw upper 90s like that, I just feel like we haven't seen that a lot lately. I'd be very interested to see if he maintains that starting role all season long. If he ends up being in the weekend rotation, how good is that stuff going to be? Because, I mean, I watched him in high school and he was at Catawba Ridge and stuff. The dude can pump gas, and I think he's a guy that he's a man on a mission this year, it feels like. So I think leading the team in strikeouts, maybe not so much a hot take, maybe just a prediction, but it's a bold one at that, I would say.
Man, you stole mine. So I'm going to go ahead and say Daniel's. Daniel said SQ is going to be the best pitcher for this team this year. Man, what am I going to say? Okay. I'm going to say that Will Tippett is going to get his stats up batting this year. Obviously, batting from the right side, I think he's going to become a more consistent hitter. We saw towards the end of last year, I think he's going to hit more home runs. I think his average is going to go up, obviously the speed and the defense there. And I think Will Tippett's going to become a very big piece of your infield this year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Again, Will's a guy that you want to root for him to do well, right? Like, he's a guy that has got great speed. I remember him coming in as a freshman. I'm like, this guy's making a double turn to a triple. Who is this guy? Like, he could be a really nice piece for you. And he's a utility guy too. He started games in center field in the Super 2 years ago, and he obviously played shortstop last year. He'll end up playing second base this year. The thing with him is, can you get that batting average up? Doesn't need to go up to 350 or whatever, but you're batting in the 200s, maybe like upper 200s, maybe like 270, 280, 290, and you're getting on base at a high clip. I think you feel really good about him being like your 9-hole bat in this lineup, maybe 8-hole. And yeah, that's what this team needs. They're going to need 1 through 9. You're going to have to be really good this year, because I think that's where offense, you could probably win a lot of games with your offense being at the top.
Thank you so much, Zach, for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, no problem. Happy to come on anytime.
All right. Thank you. This has been the SEC Baseball Nerds Podcast with Jack Veltri.